All right, so let's dive into this whole clown thing. From like funny to scary, right? We've got this article here, From Laughter to Fear: How Clowns Became Hollywood's Most Terrifying Villains. I'm pretty curious to see how they explain it.
Well, it's a pretty wild ride, actually, and it all starts much earlier than you'd think. The article actually traces clowns all the way back to 16th century Italy.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, they were called harlequins back then,
Hmm.
part of this commedia dell'arte thing. And even then, their whole act had this, like, mischievous edge, this, like, hint of rebellion, you
Hmm.
know, against, like, society and all that.
Oh, so that whole like light and dark thing, is that there from the beginning?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's kind of the key to understanding this whole thing, right? Like how they went from funny to scary. That tension between like being cheerful, but also kind of chaotic.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But for centuries, they were mostly seen as like fun and entertaining, right?
Yeah.
Especially with circuses becoming so popular with kids.
Yeah, for sure. The clown became this symbol of childhood and joy and innocence, especially in like the 19th and 20th centuries. But that image started to crack in the late 20th century. The article points to John Wayne Gacy as like a turning point.
Oh yeah, right? Like Pogo the Clown. That's a pretty dark example of things taking a sinister turn.
No kidding.
Yeah.
It shattered that illusion of the clown as this purely good figure.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think that case alone was enough to like change how people saw clowns?
It definitely planted a seed, you know, like the sense of doubt, like maybe something sinister could be hiding under that smile. But the article says the real change into the modern horror icon came from fiction, Stephen King's It, to be exact.
Pennywise. Oh man, even the name gives me chills.
That's like a masterclass in using something familiar to scare you. King taps into those deep childhood fears and twists the image of a clown who should be safe and fun into this predatory monster.
And Pennywise's design is like perfectly crafted to tap into our deepest fears. The exaggerated features, that creepy smile, that unsettling stare. It's like looking into a messed up mirror.
You got it. The visuals are huge. That's where the uncanny valley effect comes into play. Pennywise is in that weird space between human and not human, and that just triggers this primal unease.
The article also talks about how clowns in horror often break social norms. Their behavior is unpredictable, their humor can be cruel, and they just seem to exist outside the rules of polite society.
Yeah, exactly. That unpredictability is what makes them so scary. We expect certain things from clowns, laughter, silliness, harmless pranks, but when they break those expectations, it creates anxiety, a feeling of losing control.
So it's not just what they look like, but how they act. The way they move their sudden mood swings the laughter that can turn menacing in a second.
You nailed it. Think about how Pennywise moves in the movies. Jerky, unpredictable, almost like a spider. He doesn't follow the laws of physics or social norms. He's chaos personified, and that's terrifying.
And filmmakers have really embraced that terror, haven't they? Poltergeist, killer clowns from outer space, Terrifier. There's a whole subgenre dedicated to our fear of clowns.
For sure. And those movies take everything we've talked about and turn it up to 11. The grotesque looks, the unpredictable behavior, the subversion of expectations. They turn something that should be joyful into a horrifying spectacle.
But it's not just movies, right? We've had those creepy clown sightings in real life, especially in recent years. Those incidents tapped into a different kind of fear, that every day becoming menacing.
That's a great point. The 2016 clown sightings felt like they were tapping into a collective anxiety. The world is becoming more and more unpredictable and chaotic. And the clown, a figure associated with laughter and innocence, became a symbol of that unease, a manifestation of our darkest fears.
Like the line between entertainment and reality got blurred. And that's just unsettling.
Absolutely. It shows how powerful the clown image is. Even outside of movies, it can evoke primal fear, a reminder that things aren't always what they seem.
And the scary clown hasn't gone away. It's still in modern media, too. Think about Twisty from American Horror Story, or Joaquin Phoenix's Joker in that 2019 film. They're complex characters, often tragic figures, but there's still that underlying fear, like they could snap at any moment.
That's what makes them so interesting, so hard to ignore. They force us to confront the darkness inside ourselves, the potential for chaos and cruelty that hides even in the most innocent-seeming figures.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've covered a lot here. The history of clowns, how they became horror icons, the psychology of fear. But I want to talk more about the visual side. The article mentions how specific design choices make them scary, and I think that's a really interesting angle to explore.
Absolutely. The look of a scary clown is just as important as how they act. The way they're presented visually can either make them truly terrifying or completely ruin the effect.
So it's a delicate balance. What are some of those key visual elements that make a clown truly scary?
Well, it all comes down to, like, playing with contrasts
Yeah.
and like subverting expectations.
Yeah.
Like traditional clown makeup, bright colors, exaggerated features, that big painted smile. They're
Yeah.
supposed to make you think of happiness and laughter. But in the hands of the right artist or filmmaker, they can become something grotesque and menacing.
Right. So it's not just about making the clown look ugly or scary in the usual way. It's about using those familiar elements in a way that feels wrong, unsettling.
Exactly. Like think about color. For example, bright colors like red and yellow are associated with childhood, with happiness.
Yeah.
But when you use those colors on a clown's face in a really over-the-top way, they become jarring,
Yeah.
almost aggressive.
Yeah, like a warning sign. Like those bright colors are saying danger instead of let's have fun.
You got it. And then there's the white face paint, a classic part of clown makeup. But in horror, it takes on a whole new meaning. That blank white face can be really effective at creating a sense of anonymity, dehumanization.
It's like a mask, but even creepier because it erases their identity, their humanity. You can't read their emotions, their intentions. And that makes them even more unpredictable and scary.
And we can't forget about the eyes. They're often the most expressive part of a clown's face, and they can be used to create a truly chilling effect. Think about Pennywise's eyes in the new movies. Wide, almost bulging, filled with this cold, predatory hunger.
Yeah, it's like looking into the eyes of a shark.
Yeah.
No warmth, no empathy, just pure animal instinct.
And then you have examples like Twisty from American Horror Story, where the eyes are completely hidden by a mask. That feeling of not knowing what's behind those eyes, what they're thinking or planning, is super unsettling. It plays on our fear of the unknown, the hidden.
Right. It's interesting how the mask, a traditional part of a clown costume, takes on a whole new meaning in horror. Instead of hiding a harmless identity, it's concealing something sinister, something we can't understand.
And the mask lets the filmmaker or artist play with that idea of duality. The mask becomes a symbol of the two sides of the clown, the happy face and the dark side.
So we're not just looking at a scary face. We're looking at a symbol, a representation of something deeper, more primal.
Exactly. And the way those visual elements are combined and presented can create all sorts of different effects. Some scary clowns, like Pennywise, are all about being grotesque and exaggerated. Others, like Twisty, are more subtle, more psychological in their horror.
It's amazing how those different approaches can tap into different fears. Pennywise is almost a caricature of evil, while Twisty is more disturbing, more unsettling, because he feels closer to reality, to the darkness that could exist in anyone.
And that variety is part of what makes the evil clown such a classic horror figure. There's no one right way to do it. The clown can be adapted and reinterpreted to fit different stories, different fears.
But there's a risk too, right? The line between genuinely terrifying and accidentally funny can be pretty thin with scary clowns.
Oh, absolutely. If the visuals are too over-the-top, too cartoonish, it can ruin the scariness and become campy. The key is finding that sweet spot, that balance between the familiar and the unsettling, the playful and the menacing.
You need a skilled artist or filmmaker to pull it off. Someone who understands how fear works and how to use visuals to evoke those primal anxieties.
And it's not just about the makeup and the costume. The way the clown moves their body language, their facial expressions, all of that adds to the overall effect.
Like those jerky, unpredictable movements we talked about. They're creepy because they break our expectations of how a human body should move. It's like watching a puppet come to life, but with evil intentions.
That's a great point. That sense of something being off, of something not quite human, that's key to making scary clowns work. And goes back to that uncanny valley idea. We're naturally wary of things that look almost human, but not quite. It triggers a primal fear response.
Right. It's like our brains are trying to make sense of what we're seeing, but it doesn't fit with how we understand the world. And that mismatch creates a sense of unease, of danger.
Exactly. And clowns, with their exaggerated features, their painted smiles, and their often erratic behavior, they're perfect for exploiting that vulnerability.
We've talked a lot about the psychology of fear and the visual elements that make scary clowns so effective. But what about the bigger picture? What does our fascination with scary clowns say about us, about our society?
That's a great question. And I think it gets to the core of why we're still so drawn to this figure. On one level, scary clowns represent a loss of innocence, a corruption of something we hold dear. The clown, which is traditionally a symbol of childhood joy and laughter, is twisted into something dark and menacing.
Yeah, it's like a betrayal of trust. We're taught to believe that clowns are safe, harmless, especially for children. So when that belief is shattered, it's really disturbing.
Exactly. And I think that fear taps into a bigger anxiety about the world around us. That feeling that things aren't always what they seem, that danger can be lurking anywhere.
The clown, in a way, becomes a symbol of that uncertainty, that feeling of unease. It's like a reminder that even the things we associate with joy and innocence can be corrupted, turned into something monstrous.
And I think there's also an element of catharsis. By facing our fears in a fictional setting, through horror movies or books, we can process those anxieties. Maybe even find a weird kind of enjoyment in the thrill of being scared.
It's like riding a roller coaster. You're safe, but your body still reacts to the drops and turns. There's a thrill in that controlled fear.
Exactly. And scary clowns, with their exaggerated features, their unpredictable behavior, and their ability to tap into our deepest fears, they deliver that thrill in a way that few other horror figures can.
But I think there's more to it than just the thrill. The article talks about how clowns, both good and bad, often represent duality, a reflection of the light and darkness inside all of us.
That's a really insightful point. The clown, with its painted smile and hidden intentions, becomes a mirror to our own complexities,
Right.
our own internal struggles.
It's like we're drawn to that edge, to that place where innocence and darkness meet. And the clown, in all its creepiness, embodies that duality.
And maybe by exploring that darkness through horror, we can understand ourselves better, understand the human condition. But even beyond the psychology and the social implications, there's another thing that makes the scary clown so effective and enduring: its visual versatility.
You're right, the scary clown can take so many different forms, from the grotesque and exaggerated to the subtle and psychological. There's a whole visual language there that's incredibly flexible and adaptable.
Exactly. Think about how the image of the scary clown has been used in different ways in books and movies, in art, and even in real-life events like those creepy clown sightings.
And each of those interpretations uses the visual elements of the clown in a slightly different way to fit a specific story, a particular fear.
And that's what makes the scary clown such a powerful and enduring figure. It's not just a static image, a one-dimensional monster. It's a symbol, an archetype that can be molded and shaped to reflect our changing fears, anxieties, and fascinations.
Yeah, it's like the clown is a blank canvas, and we project our deepest fears, our darkest impulses onto it. And in that projection, we find this strange mix of terror, fascination, and maybe even a glimmer of recognition.
But now I want to switch things up a bit. We've been taking apart the scary clown, looking at its origins, its psychology, its visual language. But I want to ask you and anyone listening.
Okay, yeah, I'm listening. What's the question?
Well, if we agree that the scary clown is like a reflection of our fears and anxieties, changing with us, what do you think is next? Like, what harmless thing in our culture could be the next big horror thing?
That's a good question. We've already seen it with clown stalls, even those creepy Easter bunny costumes sometimes.
Exactly. So what else has that potential? You know what else sits in that sweet spot between familiar and scary? What could be twisted into something truly terrifying?
Honestly, and this might sound weird, but what about those super cutesy animal characters? The ones they put on everything, like kids' toys and laundry detergent?
Now that you mention it, there's something a little off about those big eyes and those constant grins.
Right, they're supposed to be adorable. But if you look at them too long...
Things like that uncanny valley thing we talked about with clowns, but with extra sweetness.
Ah.
And we've already seen hints of it in some horror movies with those creepy animatronic animals coming to life.
Oh, yeah, good point. Like those terrifying fursuits in Willy's Wonderland. Total nightmare fuel.
Exactly. So maybe it's just a matter of time before some horror director decides to really go all in on that fear of cute and cuddly turning evil.
I can already see it. A horde of those giant inflatable mascot things, but with bloodshot eyes and razor claws.
Okay, maybe we should change the subject before we give Hollywood any more ideas.
Yeah, good idea. But I think you're onto something. Those overly cheerful characters are just begging for a dark makeover. They represent this kind of manufactured innocence, this forced happiness that's actually kind of creepy if you think about it too much.
And because they're everywhere in our lives, the potential for horror is even bigger. Imagine those characters, the ones selling us cereal or toothpaste, suddenly turning on us.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate betrayal. The things we trust for comfort and familiarity become our nightmares.
It plays on that same primal fear, right? The familiar becoming the foreign, the safe becoming sinister. And it makes you wonder what other harmless things in our culture might have a dark side just waiting to come out.
This has been a really interesting deep dive. We've gone from the history of clowns to how they became horror icons. We talked about the psychology of fear and even uncovered the visual language that makes them so effective.
And we even speculated a little about the future of horror, what new figures might pop up to reflect our changing fears and anxieties. It's a good reminder that horror is always changing, always finding new ways to tap into our deepest fears and make us question the world around us.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of scary clowns. We'll see you next time.